Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Wednesday, April the 12th. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Trump's foreign policy. It's been very interesting to me to see. I think most people would agree that the foreign policy that President Trump has been talking about is maybe a little different than what we heard during the primaries, when many of us thought that maybe Mr. Trump was promoting a bit of an isolationist foreign policy. Well, obviously that's not the case. Mr. Trump has been pretty active in his foreign policy, and I'm not just talking about the attack on Syria. I think overall it's been a very interesting foreign policy. Again, I like it. I'm not being critical of it, but I think it's interesting to hear people like Pat Buchanan and others who supported Mr. Trump being a bit critical of his foreign policy. And today we're going to hear from our good friend Michael Prada. I'd like to know what he thinks about the foreign policy so far. Again, it's only been 80 days or so, so I think we don't want to jump to a lot of conclusions, but it'd be interesting to hear from Michael what he has to say about the foreign policy so far. Just a quick reminder, I have a post over at the American Thinker this morning where I talk about this big march, this big immigration march in Dallas that was scheduled for last Sunday, and it was supposed to be a huge mega march. Ended up being, frankly, a tremendous disappointment. At one point, the police report said that 3,200 people were actually listening to the speeches. So if maybe, I don't know, maybe another 2,000 or 3,000 went to the march, it had to be a disappointment. I think anything under 10,000 had to be a huge disappointment. And many people are talking about it. They're speculating as to what happened. I think what happened is, number one, there was no focus to the march. When you combine refugee issues with immigration and the refugee ban with immigration reform, I just think there was no focus as to what the march was about. And I think they lost a lot of the interest that there may have been in other marches. I was talking to a small businessman. He's got a small retail shop here in Dallas, and I went by the other day and I said, "What do you think happened?" And he said, "Well, a lot of people were complaining that maybe this is all about the immigration attorneys looking for business." I don't know about that, but I could see where maybe some people came to that conclusion. Let me say hello to our good friend, Michael Prada. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing great, Silvio. How are you? How's everything in Dallas, Texas?
Well, we're doing fine. I think we're going to get some rain later today, but other than that, it's typical April. The weather's starting to warm up. How about New York? What's going on over there?
Well, the weather was actually very nice yesterday and the day before. Today is in the middle. We have a couple of spring rains, but overall it's very nice. I'm very happy that we've been blessed with nice weather here in the Northeast.
Global warming, Michael. That's what it is. Global warming, isn't it?
Well, I want more of it.
What else?
Please, Mr. Gore, give me more of it.
Yeah, give me more global warming. Well, Michael, I wanted to chat with you about the Trump foreign policy, and as I mentioned in the introduction, it's only 80 days, 90 days, so I think it's let's not jump to a lot of conclusions because he's got obviously over 3.5 years to go. But it is interesting, after Syria and now the very strong posture that President Trump has taken with North Korea and with Russia and with China, that some of Mr. Trump's supporters are maybe a little confused. Pat Buchanan wrote, for example, a very interesting column saying that Mr. Trump was taking us into war and so on and so on. Just in the interest of full disclosure, I like the fact that he did what he did in Syria. I'm not supporting an invasion of Syria, but I like the fact that he took action because of the chemical weapons. I think that's the role of the United States, and I support that. North Korea is a little bit more complicated. Obviously, only a diplomatic solution would work there. And Russia, there seems to be a lot of posturing between Putin and Trump at the moment. I'm not exactly sure where it's all headed. The same with China. So, Michael, that's kind of how I look at it. I was happy with the action in Syria, not necessarily calling for more, but at least that one I supported, Michael. I'd like to hear from you.
Well, I belong to the Pat Buchanan camp. I was disappointed about the action that took place in Syria, because I think that we should have done more research, and I'm talking about as an international community, the UN should send people and find out the facts. And I said this because a couple of years ago, in 2013, there was also an incident in which Mr. Obama said, if there is ever a chemical attack in Syria perpetrated by, the Assad regime, we're going to have to intervene, et cetera, et cetera. And the very same day, there was an attack. And after a couple of months, it was found out that it was actually the rebels, the ones who committed said attack. So we're talking about a country that has a very volatile civil conflict, in which the lines, there are no clear battle lines between the parties. And if it's Mr. Assad, I think that, he should pay for it. But I think we should have taken the time to find out all the facts instead of being that reflexive. At the same time, and even though at the personal level I'm a little bit disappointed, to be quite honest, I understand Mr. Trump's position, because you have all this momentum that was built by the Democrats and those who oppose Mr. Trump, saying he's a Russian, lackey, an agent, he's in bed with Putin, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have an incident of this magnitude, this kind of catastrophe, in which you are expected to do something about it. I believe Trump was doomed whether he did something or he didn't do anything, and
right.
he was put in a tough situation. Mm-hmm. And I believe, and I agree with you in the sense that the actions that he took are limited, and he made it clear that at this point we're not going to have further involvement in Syria, which is good, because again, I'm a very a skeptical person. I think that skepticism is one of the virtues of the Western world, Western civilization. And I'm based on facts, on the empirical evidence that we have. And when we have gone in and especially in the last 8-9 years of the Obama administration, during the Obama administration, we destabilized certain countries that were ruled by people that by no means were nice people. Nobody's saying that Mr. Gaddafi was a nice guy at all. But now we have a situation which is even worse in countries like Libya. And I think that, we just need to take a pause and find out all the facts and see what happened. Maybe Mr. Assad was stupid enough to commit this heinous attack against his own people. In my opinion, doesn't make any sense, because first, he's winning the war because he has Russia on his side, and he has the indirect help of the U.S. So the U.S. is there in the ground with special forces fighting ISIS. We're not helping the Syrians directly, and we're not helping Assad directly. I want to clarify that, but we are helping the common enemy, which is ISIS. The Russians are helping him. He's winning. He's liberating. And the day after the administration says, the U.S. administration says that regime change in Syria is not a priority for us. The priority is to defeat ISIS. Then the attack happens. Boom. You know what I mean? And yes, a lot of people died. I think it was 80, 82 people, which is horrible. Many of them children, elderly. It just doesn't make any sense, the way in which the victims were being handled. If it was sarin, I don't know the pronunciation in English of the gas. I think it's sarin gas that was used. Even the handlers, the rescue workers, will be dead by touching them. So at this point, we don't know if it was chlorine, if it was sarin. So I think we should just investigate more. I think that a huge factor for many of us who decided to vote for Mr. Trump was, besides the internal policy in terms of immigration and building the wall and having a strong border, was also the fact that we don't have the money or the capabilities of being nation building all around the world when everything at home is falling apart.
Right. No, I agree with you, actually. I think that, I read Pat Buchanan's column, and I think he overstated a little bit the Trump position. I don't think that I would not support an intervention in Syria, particularly unilateral. If there's some kind of a ground, what do they call them, peacekeeping type mission or something, that might make a little bit of sense. But Syria is such a mess right now, I wouldn't even know what side to pick on. I mean, if you said to me, okay, here's 5,000 troops, where do you put them? I don't even know. I wouldn't even know what side. I mean, it's such a confusing situation, Michael.
Yes, I mean, you don't know which side is more crooked than the other. For instance, we have the white helmets. You have the white helmets that are, the people, this quote-unquote non-government organization that's supposed to be a neutral actor in the conflict, which is not. They are sided with ISIS. They've been caught helping ISIS, helping the terrorists and other factions of the terrorists. They've been caught on video, and that's all over Google. People can go and find it. They don't have to believe me. Please find by yourself. They were caught staging photos of air raid victims, staging photos of the past gassing that I told you in 2013. They are directly affiliated with George Soros, so they are not a neutral actor. I mean, and these are the people who were involved in the last gas attack as their rescuers. So I think that again, being skeptical. I mean, I'm not doubting people died, and it was as I said, it was a horrific incident. We need to, look back and truly have an international commission, the UN, go and find out who was the people who perpetrated, this horrible gas attack, and bring them to justice. If it was Mr. Assad, then so be it. He deserves to pay for it. But before we get more involved, I think that we need to put the brakes and analyze this. And going back to Mr. Buchanan, I think that the sense of a lot of us, a lot of Trump supporters who do not have a lot of information of what's going on within the administration, is that there was a sense of panic. Because besides the issue of, the strikes in Syria that happened that night, you had the issue of the internal conflicts that are going on within the White House, in which you have Mr. Bannon's, faction, and Mr. Bannon pretty much embodies that posture, Mr. Buchanan's posture and my posture of no foreign involvement in the world. Let's take care of our country first, et cetera, et cetera. And then the establishment Republicans or even Democrats, because Mr. Jared Kushner, he's a Democrat, he's a registered Democrat, who is Mr. Trump's son-in-law. So people and Mr. Bannon was getting. And he is still getting actually sidelined by the administration. He got removed from the National Security Council, and then the next day, the strikes happen, and then the conflict between the two factions is still going on. So there is a lot of fear among, rank and file of Trump supporters that his administration is getting hijacked, or even worse, that Mr. Trump is flipping on us, and he's going to be, he's going to be a third term of Obama in terms of foreign policy. So I think that's where the fear is stemming from.
Yeah, and I can certainly sense that in the Pat Buchanan column. My own feeling is that with respect, I mean, each of these cases, I think, has as I see it, has a different. It's a different case, I should say, as it should be when you look at different countries. For example, in the case of Syria, I think that was simply, if Mr. Trump, let's say, had called me and said, what do you think I should do? I would have said, do exactly what you did. That is, you go in very quick, very targeted action. You take out, I would have gone a little further than Mr. Trump. I would have actually destroyed the runways, but that's okay. I'm happy with what he did. And so I would have said, fine, do this. You've got to send a message that chemical weapons are off the table. If you use chemical weapons against civilians, you've crossed the line, to use the famous Obama line. So I think that I'm glad that he did that. The other issues, though, I hope he's very careful, because with North Korea, you have a situation. I think that's a no-win situation with North Korea, by the way. Unless you're willing to lose 100,000 civilians, that's a no-win situation. Unless you can hit North Korea, Michael, in such a way that you take out the leadership and you basically castrate their ability to respond, their military ability to respond. I mean, the minute the first shot gets fired, you're going to have a bunch of people in Seoul, South Korea, who are going to be attacked by his artillery. So that's a no-win situation. With China, I think that's primarily an economic relationship at the moment, or economic. And with Russia, I think that's pure posturing on the moment, on the part of Putin. Putin doesn't really have the ability. I don't think Putin is as tough as he thinks he is. He certainly doesn't have the military. So I don't think Mr. Trump is going to be starting any war anytime soon. But I can certainly understand, Michael, why people like you who voted for him. Well, I voted for him too, but I mean people like you who supported him so strongly in the primaries. You may remember back during the primaries that people like me were concerned that we thought that maybe Mr. Trump was a bit of an isolationist. You remember that conversation that we had back then. But so far I have to say I'm not completely unhappy with it, but I can certainly understand your concern, Michael, that, hey, we don't want to be dragged into another war because we've got lots of stuff back here, and we do, Michael. We have lots of stuff back here. I would also say one more thing, Michael, if I may just quickly. In order to get yourself into – I think – let me just say this quickly, and then I'll let you chat for a minute. One of the great mistakes of President Obama, one of the big mistakes he made, was that he never really explained to the American people how serious the situation in the Middle East was. To his credit, and I got to give President Bush credit for this, President Bush was always talking about it. He was saying, hey, this is serious, this is very bad, and if we don't fight them there, we're going to have to fight them here. So I give President Bush, whether you agree or disagree with him, at least President Bush was constantly talking about the threat. President Obama treated the threats as if they didn't exist, and I think that's what makes it more difficult for President Trump to act, because the country has not been prepared for it, Michael.
I have to agree. And going back into what you just mentioned about Bush and Syria, do you remember what was one of the first things that Democrats did when they regained control of the House in 2006? I don't know if you remember. There was the clear link of Syria, and right. Iran and Hezbollah supplying weapons to terrorists that were blowing up American soldiers in Iraq. And I believe within the same month, I guess, who went to meet with Mr. Assad to Damascus?
Speaker
Nancy
Pelosi. Or
exactly.
That's right, the new speaker.
Exactly. So she went defiant while the posterior administration was won. She went in defiance, but now Democrats, now that all of a sudden Assad became their enemy during the Obama administration, they wanted to take him down. The problem with the Middle East itself, and it's a problem that we had with Saddam Hussein, with Gaddafi, the problem that we even had in Egypt, that thank God Egypt didn't go down the way of Libya in terms of having this extremist Islamic parties taking over. Is that you have a situation that is not clear, it's not black and white. You have people that are nasty and corrupt and evil, but they are preferable than the alternative. And you have to be realistic in terms of foreign policy. And I think that, again, I'm talking about Syria. Is Mr. Assad a nice guy? No, he's not. Would I be friends with him? Hell no. But what is the alternative? Do we want to hand over Syria to these so-called moderate opposition members who we don't know who really are, and at the end of the day, right, like in Libya, turn out to be former Al-Qaeda, now ISIS people? I don't think so. Right. And again, there are so many interests involved. You have the Turkish, the Turkish people involved in the issue because they want a part of Syria. You have the Kurdish people who want there to carve out a state out of Syria and Iraq to have, finally Kurdistan, the nation that has been denied, in their view to them for centuries. And then you have, the regular Syrian people who, but judging again by the news and everything, seem to be mostly behind Mr. Assad. So it's a difficult situation. I think that the U.S. should also only intervene when necessary. I think that we should work with Russia. Again, Russia I'm not saying that we should be, best buddies with Russia because they have their interests, we have our interests, but we should work together where there is need to, and there is a common interest. In this case, the annihilation of the Islamic State. I think that's a fundamental thing. I full disclosure, I'm good friends with a senator in Russia, He's extremely pro-America. He's more pro-American than many Americans. And I know that there is a wide section of in the political establishment in Russia that it wants a reapproachment with the U.S. and they want to finally be accepted as part of the West, et cetera, et cetera. But even having said that, I think, we should take their motives with a grain of salt. I'm not saying that, we should have an entente cordiale with them for the rest of the life, but, if we can avoid conflict and help each other when we need it, why not? And that's, I think, that's the approach that many of us hope to see from the Trump White House.
Well, I think you have to be realistic around the world. Now that for a long time, the relationship with the Soviet Union, of course, was based on the USSR and that period, the Cold War. It's a different relationship now. That, as you say, it doesn't mean that we have to be buddy-buddy, but that, you don't have to be buddy-buddy to cut a deal with somebody of mutual interest. I mean, every country has their interest, we have our interest, and we have to figure out some way of bringing these interests together. But I think Libya is a good example of what happens when you replace somebody. Gaddafi was not a nice person, but the truth is Gaddafi in 2003 or 2004 came clean and said, look, here's my weapons. I want nothing to do with this. And even though he was not a nice fellow, at least he was not a threat to the region or a problem. I think when we took him out without a plan B, that created a situation in Libya that we are regretting now. But it seems to me, Michael, one last thought here. It seems to me that what happened in that region is that once we left Iraq the way we did, and once we made a threat to Assad and then we didn't follow it up, we basically left this huge vacuum that a lot of bad people have jumped into. And at this point, I don't have an idea of what to do in the Middle East except to protect Israel if necessary, or to look out for our interests. But it is a mess. It is a mess. And I think, I'm going to say this, but I think that the people surrounding Mr. Trump understand that. I don't think there's anybody in that group that wants to go to war with Syria. I could be wrong, but I don't really see that. Michael, give me a quick minute. I wanted to ask you before we take a break, I wanted to ask you for your reaction. There was you may have heard my introduction, that there was a mega march here in Dallas on Sunday that turned out to be anything but mega, or everything but mega. I mean, it was horrible. The actual output of people was terrible. 3,200 according to the police. We remember when 100,000 people would march on any march. Any thoughts what happened, Michael? Any reaction to it?
I just think the American people are sick and tired of the left trying to patronize everybody and to push causes that are clearly against the well-being of most of us, most of the people who live here in the U.S. I think that, Ann Coulter and Trump himself made a very interesting point regarding illegal immigration and our current immigration laws. Illegal immigration and our immigration laws are detrimental for everybody who is currently living here in the U.S., both citizens, natural-born citizens, or Americans by choice, like, yours truly, or even the illegals who are here already. Because it's the analogy of having a lifeboat. Lifeboat right now that is about to sink. The water is at the rim of the boat. You have to make a decision. Do you keep taking on people and go down and everybody will die, or you stop and try to save the people who are already on the boat? I think that's the situation of when it comes to our immigration policy, when it comes to the refugees. I think that when you take people from backgrounds that are entirely different from ours in terms of civilization, and we're talking about a different civilization, a different religion, and you implant those people into the Western world, you are planting the seeds of future problems. And we have seen that over and over again in Europe, and we have not even seen the worst that is going to happen in Europe. And I'm not saying that because I'm a clairvoyant, but you don't need to be a political scientist or a genius to know that the strain of Islam that it's currently present in Europe is not the most friendly to the West or to Christianity or anything else. And they will,
to women or women.
or the women or
in
gays
particular,
or everybody.
yeah.
There are people who see us as there are, the strain of Islam that's in the West now is a strain of Islam that see us as decadent, immoral, and they say we have the right to colonize and conquer these people, and I think that's a huge issue.
No, I think you're right, and I'll just say all you have to do is look at Sweden and see what's happening over there. But I'll just say one last thing, Michael, about illegal immigration. I think there may be some people in the illegal immigrant community who may be starting to realize that if they really want to pave a way for legalization for them, that we're gonna have to stop bringing in new people. In other words, that the more new people who come in, the less likely that there's going to be a solution for them. And I think maybe a lot of them are beginning to realize that, and maybe acting in their own self-interest, saying, hey, I'm already over here, and if I want to get legalized, I got to stop more people from coming over, because that just makes it more and more difficult for this government or any other government to legalize the ones who are here, Michael. Michael, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No,
but
that's
exactly the point. That's exactly the point. Listen, I am an immigrant. I came here legally. I have two siblings, correct? If I wanted my siblings I'm a citizen now. If I wanted my siblings to come here legally, there is a waiting list of 8 to 10 years. Well, they don't want to come here, but if they wanted to, and I wanted to bring them here, they will have to wait 8 to 10 years. We're talking about a decade. Why can other people play by the same rules my family will eventually have to play by, or that I had to play by? It's a very
exactly right, Michael.
Thing, and it is not about closing the door. I remember this very.
I hate to cut you off. We're going to have to.
Okay.
No, I don't mean to cut you off, but we're out of time. But I think you're exactly right. I mean, you're playing by the rules. Other people are playing by the rules, and I think a lot of the people who are here illegally, who have been here years, are maybe starting to realize, you know what? If we keep rocking this boat, they're going to send us all back. And maybe that's why I think that they have a different opinion of illegal immigration. Michael, as always, thank you for your time. And we'll do this again. I really always appreciate your input. Always great to have your input. We have you linked on Twitter. Hopefully people will follow you there. And have a great day, Michael. Thanks for your input always.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Michael Prada, our good friend Michael. Just wanted to remind everybody that effective this week, we're posting the audio portion of our program over at YouTube. And if you're a YouTube follower, you can listen to the program over there. I think you're going to enjoy that a great deal. So over at YouTube, you'll be able to hear the program. Thank you for watching, or thank you for listening, I should say. Soon we'll do the video, but we're not quite there yet. But thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas. My thanks to Michael Prada for joining us today. Bye-bye, everybody.